Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike,
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. What's new today, Mike?
dude, I'm happy because I finally convinced you to read one of my favorite books of all time and the best book I've read in a while. What'd you think of Damascus Station?
Dude, this book came out in 2021, right? Like what
Yeah,
month in 2021?
October.
October, yeah. I don't know what was going on in my life at that time. I guess I just moved into my first house. Like I had my postdoc, like things were kind of crazy. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't read this one. And maybe it's because we only got the hard copy and I was just like, so, whatever. Anyways, it's all been rectified now. I read it. I devoured it. Devoured the audiobook.
You can't stop.
Didn't want it to end. That's how much I loved this book. I love this book so much that I'm going to try to get my wife to read it because I think, unlike, I've asked her to read American Assassin, I've asked her to read Transfer Power. And I think she might enjoy them, but I truly do think she would enjoy this book. I can't believe it took me so long to read it.
Dude, that was my first reaction too. I actually took a step outside my comfort zone and recommended this one to my wife's book club, which they're always doing, whatever's on Oprah's list, or who's that other actress with one of the book lists? Reese
Oh, Reese
Witherspoon.
Witherspoon. Yeah.
I was like, of the books that I read, I think this is the one. It's got that romance, that electric romance that's under the guise of the secrecy of the clandestine services on both sides. It brings in a modern day geopolitical conflict in a very humanized way through the characters and the family dynamics. So I was like, it's going to have all the stuff that they'll love. Turns out very few of them actually read it because their book club is more of a brunch club, if you will. It's more about the food than it is about the book. And so I was severely disappointed when I made pizza for like 15 of her friends. They come over and
Oh
like
man,
one or two are like, oh yeah, I read parts of it. And I'm like, oh
I read parts of it. Well, you just don't need to go back and reread it all.
yeah. So no, I'm not getting involved anymore. I learned my lesson.
Yeah, there you go.
No
There
more
you
book
go.
club interjections for me. So best of luck with Caroline. I think she'll very much enjoy it. I hope you have a better experience.
Yeah, dude. I don't honestly. I don't know where to kick this one off. I was super excited to talk to you about this, so much so that I didn't want to postpone talking. Like I had something come up that I had to like. I was running a little bit late for the pod, but ultimately I decided I was like, I gotta talk to you tonight about this. I can't go any longer. And it was great. I actually got an opportunity today on my ride home because I finished the book last week and we had some other recordings before we could get to this. And so my mind does drift, although I have a pretty good grasp of it. But I was so fortunate that you last year in January of 2022 had the opportunity to interview with David. And like
I wish you could have been there.
we don't even need to do the interview. Like that
Yeah.
interview was so good. We don't even need to talk about this book. I just should recommend everyone go back, listen to that. And it's funny to see like these times in history, right? You guys are talking about Moscow X and you ask them the question about,
Putin's
what if
health.
what if stuff happens? Are you going to make any changes? And this was in January. And like obviously I guess things were like already kicking off a little bit with Ukraine, but my has the world changed
Yeah.
in over a year and a half, and so that's crazy. He was talking about the book would come out. Did he say the book will come out in 2023? He did say that.
I,
Yes.
I think that had been the plan, but yeah, the world is changing. There was nobody better to just chit chat
Oh
everything,
yeah, you got
geopolitics,
a great
CIA,
conversation with him. Yeah.
thrillers. He's a huge Le Carre fan. Like he was one of the most comfortable interviews in terms of. We say this about a lot of guests, but it was just fun. It was just downright fun getting to know him and learn about how he got into all this. And this is his debut novel. Let's keep that in mind, folks. Like Chris and I are going to be ranting and raving at you for the next hour or so. And this is all for a debut author. Like that is incredible because we've covered a lot of first books on this pod and we love them. And so many people broke onto the scene. They broke onto the scene with some very impressive works. However, I'm going to go a step further and say Damascus Station has the chance to be a classic. I really think it defines spy writing in the 2020s. You know, I really feel like it has everything it needs to make not only a great spy novel, but just also a great piece of fiction. And all of that is couched in real history, a relatively recent history, a conflict that is still ongoing in many ways. It maybe has faded from the forefront, and that's something David and I talked about in that interview. But it could be seen as a piece of, I don't want to call it historical fiction. That almost downgrades it from what it is. But it's a psychodrama. It's a spy thriller. It's history. It's so many genres that it's touching on, and each one of them it does exceptionally well. And I think it's just one of the novels that we read that could stick around for a long time and be known as a classic in 20, 30, 50 years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, this is like a common theme, listening to that interview and then also talking to Eric Bishop last night, like authors that he mentioned in his interview that he wrote a bunch, like he wrote the entire novel, put it away, realized that was crap, had to rework it, like, is constantly tweaking. And like he wrote it like many years before, like back in like when he was there, right?
While
like,
he was an analyst on the Syria desk during
almost,
the war.
He said it started as like journaling, like that's a decompression, his sort of like thinking about the war himself. And that's similar to like what Eric was talking to us about last night about like, all right, I had to write these 3 things and like, yeah, they might all be crap, but it's all just teaching me, to become a better author. And like, but I'm not going to give up. My third thing might be that hit. And I think for, at least with David, like he put in the work, he put in the time. The biggest thing that I have to like give praise about, and the reason I think I clicked with this book so much is that it's the same as the stuff we read, but it's distinctly different. And I like that about it. I like that it, and he even says like, yeah, there's action, but there's not a lot. There's no blood and guts in this novel. There's no like tactile description of weapons. And like he that's not his expertise. And that's not what he's going for. He wanted to show you what it's like to be a case officer, what it's like to be truly in the CIA. Like, we think about our Mick Trapps or James Reese's or our Brad Thors, and they are typically, if they're part of like some clandestine operation, they're more on the operational side, the
paramilitary side.
The paramilitary side, right? Rarely do we see fully from the same perspective as like just from like we get an eye into like what Kennedy does, but now she's a bigwig. Like I would have loved to have seen like, the Kennedy from American Assassin, like a little bit like more deep dive into that. And that's exactly what we got here.
Running agents, being a case officer. What does that look like?
Majority of your time is spent 10 hours doing SDRs. Right?
Yeah. And he takes us on that ride though. He puts us in those shoes.
I was shocked that the guy was like, all right, this is going to be a 12-hour SDR. Like 12 hours of your day is literally just for like an hour of time. Like, they set the clock, or they have 40 minutes that they know, like they can be off camera or like out of sight, and then they might get picked up or whatever. Like
it's amazing.
Learning those little nuances, and I think like, obviously I've read other spy stuff, whether it's like Ray, whether it's a Ludlum, that kind of stuff. But this is now in the modern era. And so I like that aspect of it too. It's like building upon those greats and then putting your own spin on it and making it just a solid piece of fiction, dude. Yeah. It's so good.
General David Petraeus, former director of the CIA, huge name, right? Even with the scandal he had and everything. He said, it's the best spy novel I've ever read. Like, that's insane. And even Jack Carr said, quote, most authentic depiction of modern day tradecraft in print. Absolutely. Those 2 comments sum up everything you need to know about this book and why you have to pick it up. And Chris, you asked, where do we begin? I don't know, because there's so much that I love, but I think for me, the biggest strength here is this book is character driven. And I love how that was born out of his notes being on the desk. And he probably tracked and followed so many people who actually played a role in the Syrian conflict. And he's able to turn that into these characters that you immediately fall in love with. Some you love to hate, some you're indifferent about, but indifferent in a way that you just are attracted to them, and some you absolutely are willing to die for. So where do we begin? How about we go through some characters here? And as we talk about the characters, their relationships, the plot lines, and the storylines around them will develop. And these characters play a central role in my limerick for this book.
I was waiting for it. I was like, wait, you're not going to say we have to start with the limerick? Like,
Of
all right,
course,
there
of
it is.
course.
There it is. There it is.
There once was a spy named Sam, and running SDR's his jam. In Syria, undercover, an agent, his lover, and to Proctor, you just say, yes, ma'am.
You captured all three of my favorite characters: Miriam, Proctor, and Sam.
Dude, Proctor kicks some ass in this book.
Just a note on the scores, it's got a pretty good read score, 4.25. Anything that's above like a 4.2 like is solid. It's got a 4.5 on Amazon. Those honestly should be much higher. And I think you're right. We should start with the characters, break it down one by one. I don't know, like I guess we can just kick it off with Sam. You know, when we're first introduced to him, he's put into the situation where, you know, we're starting to learn about him and his relationship with Val. And like, you know, we're immediately put into this interaction, and they're trying to get an asset out. He's missed a couple windows. That, you know, it's kind of cool. Like the spycraft goes into this safe house that has like this secret garage door, or like a garage door, but like no one really knows it's a garage door because most people don't have garages. And then this is being juxtaposed with like this protest outside, and that coincidentally that's where Miriam and Razan are at. Originally I didn't pick up on that Razan was a female. I thought she was a male cousin, and then like I guess I quickly picked it. Did you realize that it was her like female cousin? But anyways,
I don't remember on my first read. I think so, because they're talking about like she wants to remove her scarf, but I love how those two scenes are playing out side by side, and they're two different worlds. And Sam is not really a superhero. He's not shown right off the bat as what we think of as the typical protagonist in these stories. Cold open with Scott Harvath, you know, kicking ass and taking names. Mitch Rapp killing some people, sneaking up on some dudes. Like Sam is sitting there brewing coffee, like sweating it out, waiting for Val to come. And she comes and she's like, shit, shit, shit. And she's freaking out. And you get the pressure and how tense it is to be in this role. And then we find out this Komodo, who's the code name for Marwan Ghazali, who is their asset, who hasn't checked in, is not coming. And they're like, we're blown, case is over. She's got diplomatic cover. He doesn't. So they decide to leave her there. Like, this is a guy deciding to leave his colleague to the Mukhabarat and the Syrian, you know, secret police in this house, and he's going to escape and get out the way because she won't fit in the trunk, right? Because the trunk was modified to Marwan Ghazali's specs, and she tried to fit and he tried to fit, and they're like, only one of us is getting out of here, and he decides to flee. And so like he's not a superhero right off the bat. You know, he's not sold to us as going to solve everybody's problems, going to do something super badass, but he's going to do what a case officer has to do. Get out, you try to play the long game, live to the next day. And he's hoping that Valerie Owen's diplomatic cover will hold. The Syrians will stay true to that. And when he's being debriefed, he's up against bureaucracy as well once he gets back home. That debriefing scene was pretty cool, going back and forth about him recounting the events of that day.
Right.
And all of this is just an opening we don't really return to, but way, way, way later we'll have huge impacts because Val dies, right? They kill her in interrogation, and that introduces us to a whole host of characters. I guess we should call him a villain, Ali Hassan, and definitely a villain, his brother Rastum, and his muscle Basil.
Yeah, and you know, just immediately, I love how we're both introduced to Sam and then Miriam and Razan, and then like you kind of get, because you're in Miriam's head, right, as she's like looking at her cousin up there in the protest and how it all shakes down, and you know, you begin to see like that there's this woman who's, yes, she works in the palace, yes, maybe she believes somewhat in what the regime is doing, but probably not really. She wants to support her cousin, but she wants to stay alive. And like, you know, honestly, it's a common theme we're going to see with a lot of these Syrian characters. Of yeah, maybe they don't fully believe in what's going on, but the only thing that they can do is make sure they and their loved ones survive, live to the
Yeah.
next day. And like
No
so
agency. Yeah.
that's why they have to, go along. You can argue whether or not you think that's right, whatever. Ultimately, Miriam makes a choice to go against it. And in a sense, so does her uncle, right?
Uncle Dahoud.
Uncle, and so does, Ali Hassan. Like,
Yeah.
technically he betrays his country to some extent. But in all those cases, it's mainly to save their life, save any sort of their pride. Yeah, it's just interesting to like learn about the situation. Going back, this all happening 2012, 2011, right? Reading about it, I think, if we wanted to already dive into and give this a score based on setting, I think he does an excellent job describing the place in amazing detail,
Yep.
like the inner workings, moving around the city, going into the palace, going into these various safe houses, understanding the nuances of even like we can maybe talk about this later, but like when Miriam and Razan go out like on night on the town, it's a flashback,
Outside
right?
the city.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they get stuck outside the city in this town, which eventually is a town that they like end up bombing, right? Like later on,
It stands out.
you get this description of this decrepitness and how like right
Yes.
outside of where they live in the rich is this depraved poverty, right? And I just think it fully immerses you in the story, in the calamity of the situation,
Yep.
giving you all the angles. Yeah, like just amazing.
I'm glad you put your finger on that scene because I don't want to. It's sort of out of place in that it doesn't necessarily relate to the plot. Yet it's one of the most memorable in terms of the feel, the texture, not only that neighborhood they're in, but just
The
this
old
sense
lady,
of the old lady. Right, exactly. Her wrinkles are described, and the husband who ends
the
up
husband's
helping them and
scars.
fixing the car. He's
Yeah,
got the scars from prison. And there's almost this unspoken reflection on choice and agency and willpower and fate. It's all wrapped up in this conversation. Even when Razan asks for sugar in her tea and Mariam like chokes, chokes back some emotion of saying like, stop it. They're not going to have tea, sugar. You shouldn't ask. And she's like, us two Christian girls dressed for a night out on the town, boozing. And this is the daily life of our fellow countrymen. And that scene just is almost haunting. It sticks with you.
hmm
And there's no reason to go back to it. It's not like it's not central to the plot at all, yet it needs to be there.
Well, I think it's a critical piece of character development,
Exactly.
not only for
For Syria.
understanding, yeah, not only for understanding Miriam and Razan's relationship, because I think like that's initially what David was going for with this flashback, but more so, I think like the more important thing is to give us a character development of Syria. I think
Exactly.
it's cliche of us to say it, but like literally, Syria is a character in this novel,
Yeah.
and I think the best of authors can take a place, take a setting, and actually make them part of the story, not just like dropping them, you know, anywhere else. Like this story can only obviously it can only exist in Syria because it's about the Syrian civil war. But you know what I'm saying? Like you could take the
Absolutely.
elements of this story, put it somewhere else, and it wouldn't be as good.
100%. There's universal truths being told. Syria is the vehicle, yet it can't be any other than Syria. It's
hmm
uniquely Syrian, yet it's getting at universal truths of the impact of dictatorships or these legacies of like the Assad family and what they've done to regions and communities and what they've done with social strata and creating this sense of fear even for the people who work for you, are loyal to you, and rather, the upper crust of society. It's uniquely Syrian, yet it's hinting at universal truths. Here's the other thing, since we're on setting, it's not just Syria, it's also France and all the places in the Western world, because Mariam, she's not quite a fish out of water because she's Syrian, but she's also Western educated. So I think he's also pointing at other things about these societies that a lot of them, and often the people in power, including the Assad family, are Western educated. And it's kind of like this clash of values when she has to go convert Fatima and threaten her and like tell her mom's going to get arrested and all this. And Mariam knows it's wrong, but she has no choice. And then that spirals out of control when they take Razan. She really has no choice. She's so torn, going through this self-conflict, so much that she even gives up Sam to Ali Hassan and gives him the iPad device. But she's playing this game of, I don't give him everything, but I give him enough to hopefully get Razan out of this, but not enough that they'll actually go after Sam. Everyone's playing this game, these mental gymnastics. We're playing like 4D chess, and we're doing that under the threat. The threat of death is everywhere. The threat of punishment is everywhere. The knock. Oh my God. Just the knock on the door when they come to interrogate Razan. And she's like, every Syrian knows that knock. It's the Mukhabarat. And there it is. I just hit my desk as I said that. It's fate. But all these little things are just creating this texture. And I began talking about France. That's also transferred over when we're just simply training her in Ez and I think Ile-de-France they go to eventually where that hotel is. I don't need action. Like all of this is so gripping, so suspenseful, so engaging. I don't need somebody to die. And then it is really exciting when Sam realizes he's on the precipice. He can't go to bed with Mariam. He can't make that jump just yet professionally. He's like, it's too much to risk at this point. And she says, you're not getting a second chance. It's over. He's like, let me at least walk you up to your room and let's at least talk. Thankfully, she lets him in even after that. And the guys are there and they have to take out these, I think it's 3 Mukhabarat guys with a lamp. And they were just practicing, Krav Maga. She's training the Krav Maga in her underwear in her room. All of this hits for me. And yes, that action scene was cool. And they kill these guys and the banditos come and clean it up. And I didn't need more of it. Like that was enough blood and guts right there. It did something to propel their relationship. It basically got her to forgive him. And we didn't just leave it there with, we killed some dudes, rah, rah, this was crazy. They then sit down together, right? Remember Mariam in her robe and he's like, we need to talk about this. And she's like, stop. I get all the questions first. I'm going to give you the download of my questions and I'm going to assess if you're being honest with me and you better be honest with me. And then we're going to move on with this relationship and figure out what we do next. It's so real. They don't just kick ass together, kill these dudes, go on the run and, end of story. It's followed up with that really deep conversation of what do you want out of this relationship, this professional relationship, but this spy agent relationship as well. Where's it going to go? Let's clarify how we're going to be honest with each other, how this is going to work. And I just think that's how a lot of these things will go down.
Yeah, and I think like the advantage of, that whole tension between, we don't fully understand Miriam. In the beginning, we're thinking, all right, maybe she truly is, a Syrian, like fully hardline Syrian. And then we obviously know Sam's intentions because we're in his head. And then that cat and mouse game that they're playing, like, in the beginning, you're thinking like, oh, is he going to get her? Is she like realizing who he is and she's going to try to turn on him? You don't know like where that it's going to ultimately end where it does. You're thinking like, you're constantly just thinking, where can this go?
Yeah, exactly.
And then at every turn, he does a 180 and he switches and like ultimately brings them together. And then after that, there's now tension built about, all right, is she going to get caught? Like, are they going to get caught? Like, is he going to get caught? Is he going to get caught sleeping with her? Is he going to get caught by the Mukhabarat? And then he adds on the layer of her then turning on him in a sense, what dynamic is that? Do you like in the beginning you're like, oh wait, did she actually really turn on them? And then it's like, oh no, she like kind of half it. But is that ultimately going to lead to him getting discovered? You don't know where this is going to go because there's so many players involved. And I think that David does a really good job of keeping us on our toes as readers, stringing us along the entire time and really turning it into that page turner type thriller.
Agreed. Without needing your traditional action for one of these books. That suspense is more than enough and in many ways even more gripping. It even comes to a head kind of towards the end as we're ramping up to everything when Proctor's like, Did you
Yeah,
sleep
we
with
haven't even
her?
talked about Proctor yet.
No,
Yeah.
we didn't even talk about her. But the whole Sam and Mariam relationship comes true when he knows she burned him, but he still is going to go to bat for her. And then she ends up saving him. That attack on like I think it was like a river walk where she shows up out of the blue, breaking all protocols
To give
to
him some
save him.
information. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, no,
because
to
she
give him,
has to.
she has information. Yeah.
She has to pass that information about Wali Barada, wherever they're taking the sarin gas and the chemical weapons, and like she knows she has to get it to him, and he has to make the choice to trust her. She has to make the choice to reveal it. He has to make the choice to trust her. Proctor has to make the choice to trust Sam in his instincts. He even told her earlier, he's like, Mariam's being funny. There's something going on. You know, like that meeting we had with her, she was holding back. I know something's wrong. And Proctor's like, are you sure she's just not screwing us and screwing you? And like everybody's guessing who's on whose side. Yet what comes through is their relationship with one another is strong enough. They've built that up. We've seen it develop. So we're rooting for them. And, you know, we know who's on the right side. But the fact that that note of who got which of the sites as this play to see where the leak is, we're seeing that at the highest levels run up the chain to Bashar Assad and the head of the secret police and all this. And it's all because she's hiding in the bathroom, that she heard this tip and went to go pass it to Sam. I really love that stuff inside the palace and inside the Syrian upper echelons, and getting to be a fly on the wall of the conversations where they're trying to uncover the mole, but he's nervous that it's his own girlfriend who, you know,
Right.
works for the security services. I really think the relationships are being developed on our side as well as they're being developed on the Syrian side. And there really is a balance of how much time is spent on each.
Yeah. And I think that that's just another element of the suspense, right? It's, they're running like a Tyrion Lannister style,
Right.
weed out the mole
Yes.
game. They don't know that Miriam was the one who stole the information from the laptop originally, right? So they're putting their feelers out, trying to get that. So that's one evidence of suspense. And then, we don't know that. Also, like you mentioned, Gabriel and the bomb. Like, there's the whole operation with Sam to try to bomb Ali Hassan, and then,
Right.
but at the same time, you have this other like rebel leader who they even like mentioned. I think David writes the comment. Sam had the unfortunate that what's his name? I forget the commander's name who ends up getting captured, but like he placed his bomb first,
Yeah.
and so like there's that element, and like that was like a one liner at the end of a chapter. You'd be like, oh shit, like what's going to happen? And just bringing all those elements in, just again adding more to the suspense, more to the page turnability of this novel. Yeah, really makes it shine.
Yeah. We haven't even covered like so many of the scenes because you said the flash drive. That's
It's
exciting.
there's too much to cover, so we kind of
There's
have
too
to
much.
we kind of like it's read the book, but I think like we're gonna touch on certain elements, and I think we got to move to Proctor because she's a probably one of my favorite characters. In the beginning, I didn't quite get her. The way he describes her in the beginning, this super quirky character, head of station. I think she shows up like wearing like an all like teal blue velour to like one of the meetings. Says like puts the word dog shit in like her cables to people to say like plans are bad. Originally I thought like she was like this older lady who was going to cause a problem, but then I realized that she's more of like just this hard ass, maybe like super old, but maybe like I'm envisioning someone like maybe late 40s, early
Yeah,
50s,
I'd say.
but like trim, fit,
Still with it. Oh, yeah,
like with
absolutely.
it, like does keeps herself in shape, can take names,
When she's
can kick
swinging
some
that Mossberg
ass.
around
Yeah,
during the
exactly.
embassy raid, like, whoa, that's just
I wanted to
gung
ask
ho.
you, like, if this was to be able to turn into a movie, who do you think would be a good cast for that?
Oh, dude, there's so uh there's so many people. Catherine Zeta-Jones, I feel like
Interesting. Okay.
as maybe a little younger comes to mind. Who are you thinking? Because I feel like there's a type in my mind, but I can't match it with a person.
So I was thinking like a cross between what's that? What's her name? Oh, why am I thinking of her name? Jane. Um,
What about Charlize?
I dude, I was Charlize Theron like was one of the first things I thought of.
I think as a brunette though, because that's definitely how I picture Proctor.
Yeah, yeah.
Like just putting her hair up in a ponytail, grabbing that Mossberg, and just going to town, you know. And then Zelda, you know, that was weird about Zelda. I was like, is she on our side? Is she not? There was something funny I thought for a minute going on there. And then the way Proctor goes up and down the stairs with the shotgun, and I love that embassy scene. I forgot that it happens towards the very end there. I thought it was a little bit earlier in the book, and even they're talking about shredded documents and all this. That's Proctor's like coming out party. Like she kind of had a back seat earlier in the book, and then by then you're like, yo, this Proctor needs to stick around. And thankfully, she's going to be in the next book. She's the only character in Moscow X.
So
that's a smart move.
In my headcanon, it was a combination of Charlize Theron and do you know Jane Lynch? You know who she is.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Because she's like witty, funny.
She's witty, yeah.
And like could punch it, like you literally could punch a dude in the dick and like just walk away. Like, you know, that kind of like.
She could. This fuck all attitude.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
yeah.
That's exactly what Proctor was like screaming to me.
Yeah, but I could see that.
I was visioning her being younger and, you know, a little more fit, but.
Yeah, I think if you put all these together, you bulk Jane Lynch up a little. Yeah. Yeah, and she's got the tattoos for all the agents.
I loved in the end that Proctor just didn't. What did she say? Like, I don't forgive you, but I trust you. Like, you know, like she can never like forgive him for what he did, but she could like get over it a little bit in the sense, and like really because she knew what Sam was, why his heart was in it, felt for him. She even says like, I don't want to have to put another fucking star on my back for you. Like, you know, you have to make this right. And ultimately she is, and I did agree with your point, like in a sense, like her and Butina are like 1-to-1 in the sense that they will do anything to, you know, get to the end game. And like, she's like, run the asset, you know, get the intel, save your asset.
Yeah, protect your asset, collect the intel. And like that was all that mattered to her. And I feel like Butina was like, you go get Fatima. Like, just go get her. You know, like, get her back. Like, I don't care if you have to take her family. I don't care who you have to threaten. Go do it. Like, that's your mission. So those are kind of the ways I saw those two together. Obviously, I don't want to like Butina at all. But if I were on their side, I would. You know, she would be like a Proctor to me if
I think
that was my intention.
Butina is one of the characters where she's like Ali Hassan. Like I think we should get into the Hassan brothers,
torn,
like, because you know one of them is despicably evil and is definitely like the quote unquote villain of this novel.
Yep.
The other one, I guess, is also a villain, but you know, again, you mentioned this in your interview. You want to like him.
Yes,
like he's this, you know, this flawed character that at times I feel like you feel for it. And David even said like you're supposed that I was going for that.
Yep.
Like that's how you should feel reading it.
He nailed it.
You know, this a likable villain that you know at times you root for, at times you're rooting against. Yeah, but his brother on the other hand is like the complete opposite of that. Like, a villain you can never, ever, if you do, then something's deeply wrong with you. Get behind.
And another little vignette thrown in the beginning to set that up and do that character building and world building is when the neighbor, a family friend of Ali Hassan, knocks on their door and says her son's been taken. And Ali Hassan calls in the favor to see if his brother can track him down and see what prison he's being held in. And, you know, he's being abused there pretty much. And Rustum's like, you got to stop calling in these favors. You got to stop being sympathetic towards these traitors. He's like, he was a kid. He was out drunk, you know, got in a spat with an agent, didn't actually do anything bad. Like, he can learn from this and move on. Like, we grew up with this family. Like, why are we locking up families we grew up with?
It wasn't he like the doctors, the village doctors, like son?
Yeah. Exactly. And Ali Hassan played with him as a kid. And we see that human side of Ali. And we see Rustum like not able to realize that, does not have the emotional intelligence to care about that. He's such a hardliner. So I love how that's set up. And then it all comes to a head, which I really think my favorite part of the book is like the 3/4 mark, maybe like 80% through, where the bombs start dropping, where it is all out war, and Ali Hassan, his wife, has like just come home. This is scary. I don't know what's going on. And meanwhile, he's wrapped up in the whole Sam Joseph thing because, you know, the bomb went off at the palace. The embassy's being raided by Basil and his goons. And Ali's wondering about the chemical weapons, right? Because we thought Butena was the mole, and that was a setup. And Jamil Atiya is going down, and they planted stuff on his cell phone. And Ali Hassan is just like, what the hell do I do? Like a bomb nearly got us in Assad's palace. The country's going to shit. This thing's falling apart. I know my government's about to unleash chemical weapons, sarin gas on these civilians. Do I just go home to my family? And he's that family man we're torn with, but he can't go home because he has this unfinished business. And I think secretly he wants to find a way to stop this from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he gets caught up with Samuel Joseph and the Americans. And Sam cooks this plan to let himself be turned in to make his way to Ali Hassan because he believes that he can turn him. And he believes that he can get Mariam out by using Ali Hassan's weakness. And I just love how it all comes to a head right when the bombs are dropping and the city's going to shit. Like, that, it was really exciting, which comes at the exact same moment or shortly before one of my other favorite scenes. Uncle Dahoud does the right thing.
Right.
He knows he's not coming home. He knows how bad the government has been. He knows the sarin gas is going to get used, and he's probably going to be a loose end that gets cleaned up. And he tells Mariam, he goes, practically, I know you've been talking to the Americans, right? Like, I know you have friends. He basically knows his own niece is the traitor, is the mole.
Right.
And he's in charge of Assad's chemical weapons. He's the number one man after that sniper hit appointed to the job. And he wants desperately someone to stop him. Like, he wants somebody to stop him in his tracks, yet he doesn't know how without losing everything. And he turns to Mariam and says, I'm going to leave you with some information, and what you do with it is up to you. And no, whatever you choose was the right choice, but I need you to be able to make this choice. And he kind of secretly lets her know where the chemical weapons are being held so she can go turn it over to the Americans. That whole sequence of events is my absolute favorite. And I love that scene of Uncle Dahoud giving Mariam the choice about what to do while he goes off. And he's hoping, he's going to the chemical weapons depot, ready to give the orders to let these things loose, hoping Mariam can stop him.
Right. Yeah.
And then the Americans come in and there's a flyover. It's insanely good.
Yeah, like all that's happening like so quick. It's very propulsive again. And it's just the suspense that drives the novel forward. One other thing before we move forward past the Hassan brothers, but like the backstory flashback we get, like sort of a deeper understanding of why these two brothers hate each other was just intense. Like, it was super intense, and like you really understand like how messed up of a situation this is. And you know, I guess Rustum blames him for quote unquote killing both his moms and his dad, but you know, he's not justified in wanting to kill his brother. And ultimately, you know, something is wrong with this kid. You could see from a very early age. And I think like that just does another good character development, understand this brotherly ish dynamic and what's going on here. And ultimately leading up to like when Rustum cracks and stabs Miriam, and Ali has to make that decision, you know, like what the hell am I going to do? Like, he could have just let it happen, but ultimately decides his brother can't live anymore. Like, you know, and his brother, he even says, my brother was dead a long time ago. Like, I didn't just kill my brother, I killed someone else.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think like Connor does a really good job of setting that dynamic up, building it up. And then ultimately you get that climax with that tension in that interrogation scene, you know, fulfilling the destiny of what the two brothers were meant to be. And like you're in that moment again. This is like coming back to like why you kind of want to like Ali, because in that moment you're rooting for Ali. You want him to kill his brother. Like, you want his brother to die because he's such a messed up dude, right?
Yeah. And you want him to join Sam, and they kind of find that third way out of the quagmire,
right?
Where they're like, he's like, I'm not working for you, you're not working for me, but we can each get something out of each other. Like, this could be mutually beneficial moving forward. I remain in my job, which means my family's protected. But if I ever need a bailout from you and the Americans, I'm not on your shit list. Like, protect
Yeah,
me
so I'll take
if
it to
you
the
come bomb
embassy.
the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, take me to the embassy, or if you're bombing, consider where I live and work. Don't bomb us. And Sam gets out because of that. And so there's this unspoken agreement of like, we're not working for each other. We didn't turn each other, but we can respect each other professionally and look out for one another. And who knows the dividends that will pay down the road. Like, that's a huge thing of a lot of the spy stories you hear. And even the Americans, I talked about that with David. He's a huge fan. We went on a big tangent of that. You sometimes build these relationships, or you keep an asset, because you don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years. And if you could pull on that string in that relationship, it might pay off in ways you never thought of. And so you don't burn people, you don't stab people in the back right away. You keep lines of communication and dialogue open. And eventually, maybe that dead drop will hit, and you'll get that key piece of information, or someone will decide to turn or drop you a line, all because of something you scratched their back, years ago. And I love that we're setting up a long game here. That, who
Yeah,
knows,
it's a long game.
it could come back. Exactly, we could see this again down the road.
I was happy to learn in your interview with David that, while we could just come to an ending and, have our own headcanon about how it goes forward, because they were able to give these signals to say they're both safe, they're on the outside, he's not fired, he's going through this internal review board, whatever. And we also found out that we know that Proctor is going to be in the next novel. Super
Yep.
excited to start that when it comes out on audiobook next week. But he said, maybe I'll have an opportunity to go back to this story sort of towards the end of the war, and hopefully pick up with these characters again, and see that. So it's a nice novel where, like, it's if he never goes back to it, I'm perfectly fine with it. Like, there's like some threads that I think there is room to elaborate further on, but it is in a sense complete, if that makes sense.
Right. It's both complete and unfinished, which is very much like, I would say, the Syrian civil war and conflict, right? Like, the Assad regime is still in charge. How much has changed? The violence, and I'm sure various factions of rebel cells are absolutely trying to muster, whatever their next phase, their next wave is in this thing. But the Assad regime is still in complete control and clamped down. So I feel like whenever you come back to that story, these characters, including Syria as a character, could be in a whole nother state of mind, but the plot can be resolved or driven by these old relationships, the things that happened way back when in the thick of battle kind of hardened and tested their mettle, so that when we see them operating in a completely different Syria in some ways, years later in the present, they can pull on those old strings and favors to resolve whatever needs to be resolved then and in the future. And that's going to be kind of cool. That leaves a lot open for storytelling. And the fallout of the embassy hit. Like,
Right.
if it gets traced that Basel was scalping people and calling up a mob, like, the effects from 79 in Iran are still very, very much alive, 50 years later or whatever, still very much at play, the dynamics and outcomes of that. So that just happened in Syria, right? In 12, 13, 11. So the 2020s and the 2030s are going to be heavily impacted by a massive event like storming an embassy.
Yep. Yeah. Do you want to get into the scorecard a little bit?
Let's do it. Yeah. I mean, this is going to be a rip.
I mean, it's pretty easy scorecard, to be honest with you.
I'm torn on one thing, and I'm curious to get your take. So let's start with that, because it's right off the bat. The one thing I'm torn on: plot's a 10, no matter what. How are you going to score action? Because the action is more that suspense, as we talked about, these thrilling moments of who's going to turn on who's going to catch who. Can we give it a 10 for action because of that? Or does it have to be more hand-to-hand combat and we didn't necessarily get that?
Honestly, I was like thinking today about, I think about my scorecard like the whole day we're about on a pod, and
Yep, same.
And I'm like, we're typically doing action because we're reading stories that have a lot of action, and we want to talk about like how well that was executed. However, this is like a little bit of a different novel. I think like, our next novel we're going to read, this week and do a pod on it, but probably won't release that for a couple, like at least until we talk to our patrons. But that's, Le Carre's This Bio Came In From the Cold. And in a
It's the same
sense,
thing.
that's going to be very similar, right?
Right.
And so maybe this should be a different category here where action plot are kind of like one large
Worth
category
20.
worth 20 and we can score it, however, because I think if we had to just purely rate the action, okay, let's pull out the scenes. You have the opening scene
Yep.
where, the protest slash
Yep.
crack on the safe house. You have the obviously attack on the compound, a lot of different, scenes where the bombs coming in at the very end.
The hotel killing the bodyguards.
Yeah, the
Like I
hotel killing the
mentioned.
bodyguards. What else?
There's
Yeah,
not
it's
there's
all
not
like
too much.
little things.
But the briefcase, right? Or putting in the flash drive, like that is
That's
just as
suspenseful.
thrilling
That's just as thrilling as like, someone going in and
as a
taking
shootout.
out.
That's just
Yeah,
as thrilling as a
exactly.
shootout.
Exactly.
Or even the bomb makers, right? The kid with the tea cart rolling it in and shaking and fumbling, and then the bomb goes off, and the aftermath of that. That's an action scene in many ways, Like that's akin to Mitch Rapp taking out 10 guys at a safe house in Leesburg with a single Glock 19. Like,
Well, think about it this way, right? You're watching like Mission Impossible, okay? And you have like the first one. There's like two sorts of action in that movie, right? You have the helicopter scene at the end where it's chasing a bullet train, but you also have the scene when he's in CIA in Langley's headquarters, like propelling down from the air ducts, and like that is an action. That is like that is
yeah.
an like the whole prep for the mission and like the lead up and like that kind of stuff, and like that's exactly what we got throughout this entire novel is that kind of suspense.
But here's what's kind of crazy is like I'm just as suspenseful in those things as I am with Sam sitting on a park bench for 3 hours reading a book, pissing off the people who are following him, and then he leaves his bag somewhere. Like he leaves like a rug store. He was shopping for that rug, but he left his camera on purpose so
So
that
you
he
could
can
go
double
double
back
back.
and turn around. And when he turns around, he can notice if anybody's following him and then trails him back to the store. He's like, oh, forgot my camera. Like for some reason, the way David delivers that is as thrilling as, Ethan Hawke, jumping off of the whatever it is,
Burj Khalifa.
the Burj Khalifa or whatever in a wingsuit, like it's crazy to say I was just as invested with this dude walking around Damascus, making left turns, right turns, doubling back. I even think of that as action, a suspenseful action in a sense.
Yeah, so we got to come down to we have to
Here's
make a
the
decision.
stakes. The stakes are if I can find it in myself to give that a perfect 10, this book's a 50 out of 50. That's why.
Exactly.
That's
why
why
this
it
is
hinges on this. If we go 8 or 9 here, this book's a 48, which is way different than saying it's a 50 out of 50. And I think it deserves that perfect score, if I'm being honest, with the asterisk of it's not action qua action, but it's action qua suspense of a real life case officer running an agent in a war zone.
So I'll play devil's advocate. In the past, we've put that stuff
In plot.
in plot and buy-in.
Yes,
And
I
so
know.
so if we want to be true to what our scorecard so far has been, action to this day has purely meant action. And if that is the case, I gotta give it an 8. It's a good score, but just not having, I guess, not that I wanted more, but like just, the action we did got was good, solid B.
Fair point taken. I'm going to push back on that, however, and say you also have to recognize genres, though. And 90% of the books we read, 95% of the books we read are this more pop fiction thriller. I wouldn't necessarily put this in the same genre as that. I think of it more as literature. Like you said, we're going to read The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. We're going to be severely disappointed if we think of it from an American, modern day, post Vince Flynn thriller novel, because the genre of British spy fiction is just so different. And David did self-profess say he was leaning into the school of classic British spy fiction in a modern setting. And because of that, I think whatever past things we've done on our scorecard were the one genre we've covered so far. And I don't think we can be so strict to say we must apply the same standards of that scorecard to someone that is intentionally going outside of the genre and reflecting the more British spy style of 30 years ago.
I'm also of the mind of like something should be really hard to get a 50. Like almost nothing should be a 50. So
sure, and I'm gonna take some heat here. I gave a 50 out before, and
yeah, what did you give a 50 out before to?
It was Sons of Valor 2, which I'm hoping we can still cover here because Sons of Valor 3 came out today. Today's the pub day, yeah. But here's the thing: I'm gonna, unfortunately, and I gotta own this. I'm going to take a step back and say there was a mistake there. However, the mistake was not in action, plot, buy-in, bad guys, good guys. I stand by that being a perfect score. It's the cover. I went to a 5 on the cover on that when it truly is probably in that 4 range. So I agree we should be very strict on these things, and that 50 out of 50 should be near impossible to get. And I maybe was a little too loosey-goosey earlier. And you were there with me, man. I went Andrews and Wilson.
I would have pushed you hard on that. I will put. We're gonna do a proper scorecard when I read the book. So
exactly, I'll have a chance to set the record straight. So I agree. You weren't there to push back on me. I kind of went solo. I got a little too ahead of myself. I want to walk that one back, which we'll be able to do when we cover those books. I don't think I want to walk this one back. If I give this one a 50, I cannot see myself walking it back. Okay, I unfortunately didn't read it when it came out. I read it a few months later, and then I talked to David in January 2022. I wanted to kick myself for not reading this the day it came out.
All right. I want to kick myself for not reading it when you told me to read it in January 2022.
A year ago, yeah. So I read it a second time immediately right when I picked it up. And then a few months later, I recommended it to the book club. I read it a third time. I loved it so much that third time, I read it a fourth time. And then I just listened to it again to prepare for this a fifth time. That's so rare for me. There are Vince Flynn books I haven't even read more than twice. So I picked this up 5 times essentially in a year. So I'm like, that's insane to say that. So I'm doing it 10 on action, and that 10 on action means a 50 out of 50.
No, you're just giving right to it. Yeah. We could
spoken.
just, everything else for me is 10, 5, 5. You know, yeah, no, it's 5, 5, 5. And I'm a 48. This is probably our least suspenseful thing. But I think, the plot and the buy-in, it's all there. It's There's nothing to nitpick. The good guys, Sam, Proctor, Miriam, in a sense, Ali, her uncle, all the Syrians we get, and then you want to go into the bad guys, like also Ali, Atia, Basil, like, learning about these rebels and like that kind of stuff. Like, not that they're bad guys. Like there's kind of like this. Yeah. You kind of is like this amorphous like juxtaposition of like who is good, who is bad. Yeah, character development really good.
Yeah,
we already talked about the setting. We haven't. I want to give the cover a 5 because I thought it was very good.
Right. Before we talk about that, can I just give 2 small criticisms? Sure. And I don't think they're enough to drop it by half a point anywhere on the scorecard.
Okay.
But we pull things apart, right? So I think I still, even though I'm making that call, I still want to be objective and say it's not perfect. Nothing can be perfect. And if I were to find it, there are 2 kind of not loose ends, but 2 things that I'm just like, could it have been worked in better? One of them is the opening when he goes to the cabin and brings the beer and is talking to the guy's wife, who eventually offers him the Damascus Station job to go and be station chief over there. I feel like that character was not Bradley, I think, was not brought in enough. He was brought in once or twice when they were making operational calls back at Langley. But I really liked him in this opening scene, or towards the beginning, one of the early chapters, going to Bradley's cabin, going to his basement, staying over there, and basically talking about this op and what they're going to do in Syria. I felt like Bradley had an opportunity to come back a few times, a little more than he did. It wasn't required, so I'm not dropping a point, but he was almost left there as this kind of old guard, head honcho, very influential person who maybe could have made an operational call at a critical moment that unleashed Proctor. Unleashed Proctor and Sam at the right time.
Yeah, but I think like instead we just got more of Proctor.
Exactly.
I think if you had him
It hampers
play
Proctor.
a bigger role, then you would have to cut it somewhere because this
Agreed.
book is pretty jam packed, and I think inevitably you would just get less Proctor, and I wouldn't have wanted that. So,
and I was glad Proctor grew into the role and played center stage, and not just some guy from Langley, some desk guy who's making calls. The fact that we gave that agency to Proctor, I think, replaced that, and I was fine with it. And you still have Bradley there for future stories. He can still be around. He kind of had like an aura around him that he was this wise figure who could make these calls, and so he's still there for the future. The other one is the bomb maker and his wife, who was this sniper, almost this like ghost sniper who racked up all of these kills.
They were cool, and I thought they were going to be worked in a little bit more than they were.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I guess they're just like a plot device, right? To
Correct.
push something along. Obviously, she's there to kill the leader. Dahoud's boss, right? So that he'd
replace.
So he replaces him, and then also to, at the same time that the CIA is trying to bomb Ali Hassan, they bomb him, which ultimately, like, I guess causes like some, like, why the bombing doesn't ultimately work, right? That's why they have to wait so long. So yeah, but I thought that they were really cool though, and I thought that there was more that you could have done with them.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I agree with you. I wouldn't dock at a point or even have a point because, maybe if you do have more of them, what are you going to take out? Like you can't really. I think they fit in perfectly, but I do see your point in the sense that they're cool characters that could have had more of them.
You could have had more, so that's part of the issue. It was a little awkward when they were mentioned because he was making the bomb side by side when the CIA lady was making the car bomb in the door, and there could have been. I do think it took me to my second or third reread to truly understand which bomb was made by who, like the car op to let the car door blow out and get Ali Hassan on his smoke break. That was a CIA op that the lady was making that bomb. But then we'd cut and he's making another bomb as this Syrian rebel cell, the dude who lost his fingers. Got murky for half a second. But here's the other reason I can't deduct points for that. One, it wasn't that bad. We're like picking nits here. But the real reason is that's the reality of this conflict, right? It wasn't as clear cut as Syrian government, bad guys killing innocent people. The Americans supporting some rebel movement, trying to hurt the bad guys. There was always this element of, is it ISIS, who's out there doing something for their own gains and they're trying to make inroads? Is it a rebel cell that's not working with the Americans or the other known rebel cells? Is there an independent rebel cell that's going their own way? And so I have no trouble believing that there were other cells, other independent actors, unawares to the Syrians and the Americans and anybody else involved in the game, whether they're on the terrorist side, whether they're on freedom side, whether they honestly are just doing this for themselves. I got this sense that it murkied the waters of who's who on what side of the Syrian conflict and introduced this third actor, which wasn't unknown to our intelligence and Syrian intelligence. And to me, that's probably the reality. So It felt weird when they came in, but I think it reflected the status on the ground.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, so what about this cover, man?
The cover, yeah. It's hitting on all fronts. I mean, we just looked it up, and I knew it was like minaret mosque. Of course, this has to be somewhere. It is the Grand Mosque of Damascus. So we are talking about judging the cover by the book. We're in the right place. The strips of red, the way they're shaping, is like referencing this trope, this Cold War trope of like shredded paper, right? And piecing together a puzzle or a cable, right? There's some sort of cable coming through and you only have a few letters on a scrap piece of paper, a little strip, and you're decoding. So whether it's decoding a cable or whether it's a shredded document, those red lines going horizontally in their being misshapen totally is evocative of that Cold War era.
Right.
And then the color, it's so drab in the background, yet so vibrant with the red. it's almost a contrast between a very boring grayscale. The city in some ways is old, is run down, but it's blood. It's that bright red vibrancy of war that kind of shocks you out of that. And so I love this dichotomy between the modern text, bright red color, and this very drab grayscale minaret mosque in the background.
Yeah, and I like the birds. Like,
Yes.
obviously this is probably just like a picture, like a true picture that was taken, and then they ran with it. But and the birds are just there because they're there. But sometimes like birds, like in some cultures, represent like ominous like tendencies, or like something bad is going to happen. Like when the birds are there, then or when the
Hitchcock
birds
movie.
start, yeah, like when the birds start to fly away, like something is going. Obviously there's some movement there, that or like something that caused them a disturbance, and it just leads to this eerie-ish feeling that, like, all right, something's going to happen in this novel, which obviously it does. And then there's a second novel, a second cover. Is this the British version?
I believe it looks like it should be, but
Yeah.
I believe it's the Kindle version. So I don't know if that's
Oh,
Kindle
okay.
worldwide, but it looks like a typical British printing of a
Right, it
thriller
does.
novel. It does.
We just get like essentially the same cover from a different angle, you know, different coloring, but I like it just as much. Like it's pretty cool. Obviously the first cover is just amazing. Like
Yeah,
hands down, really
it's
good.
classic.
But so yeah, that's the cover, man. All we need to know is who's your winner, man. Who is your free space?
I mean, there's so many ways I can go with this. I just have to say the cast of characters in general, the ensemble, if you will. This really is an ensemble kind of book. I think it could have very much been too many cooks in the kitchen. And maybe the first time I read this, I struggled with that a little bit. Uncle Dahoud is Razan's father, they're cousins. Mariam and Razan, maybe. Butena, Mariam, Razan, Proctor, who's who. Ali Hassan, Rustum, Basil, Jamil Atiyah. He kind of got a little lost in the shuffle of who is he the first time I read it. So the fact that you could keep all those people straight, all of their stories intertwine in a buyable way, the story checks out, each character always checks out, their motivations check out, their backstories check out, and you have this many of them, is a feat. So I'm going to say what David created in terms of this ensemble of characters, ones like Ali Hassan, who are so deep. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they villains? Are they sympathetic villains? Or are they actually not villains at all? He's asking those questions of multiple characters. And Sam, is Samuel Joseph even a hero in this book? He's obviously a protagonist, but could you call him a hero? Does he go on the hero's journey? I don't know. And so I'm even questioning that. So you've created some very complex characters. You've nailed the relationships and dynamics between them. And at the same time, you wove each of them into the plot in a way that was necessary and checked out. And that, to me, is a massive feat.
Yeah. Yeah, mine's kind of like piggybacking up on you. I gotta go with the Banditos. I really like these guys. I thought that
Yes.
Sam immediately was like, I'm going in. I need them. He's the man, and they are his man in the chair, even though they actually do surveillance and stuff like that. But yeah, and I thought you could have easily done a whole story about them, and like
Yeah.
that just shows like how good of like a side characters they are. And I think one of the aspects of them, right, is that they're native Syrians, and so their skin in the game for them. The reason that they're there is because they obviously feel some way about the conflict, and so they want to put their mark on it, and that's why they're fully pot committed into the bombing, try to take out Ali Hassan, into getting Miriam, turning her over, tracking them, helping Sam out in any way they can.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like those three people.
Love that. Honorable mention. Just going to throw out an honorable mention. The SDRs.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the actual life of a case officer, and how it's way different than most of the books we read. They're not the special operations group or the special activities division. They're a total different set of training and skill set that is about people, that's about vulnerabilities and choices and relationship. And all that's nailed in the dialogue when he's recruiting Mariam in the first place, when they have to talk about who they truly are and what this partnership is going to look like. Nailing the dialogue, nailing the SDRs, the training, the spycraft, it's all there. So I know that's a grab bag of honorable mentions, but they deserve to be mentioned.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Dude, man, love this book.
Damascus Station. I got you on board. I did it.
Yeah, so I guess next week when we come to you, we'll be talking Moscow X.
Eventually, yeah. Is that the next one up? We're doing The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which we talked about.
Yeah, but we're not going to publish that until after we talk to our homies, right?
Yeah, well, we'll see. I guess we could hold off on that. We got Moscow X. Ward Larson's book, Assassin's Mark, comes out on December 5th, so we'll have to work that in. But yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be Moscow X, Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and Assassin's Mark next on the docket.
There you go. So read up. Again, we need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just like Proctor, be Proctor.
Protect the agent, collect the intel. Can I give a little postscript here, a little post-credit? And unfortunately, I don't want to be a doubting Thomas, but I feel like a part of me, I set the bar so high with how much I like this one, combined with the Furman theory of second novels. Second books are hard. We've seen a few examples of a second book, not flatlining, but a step down from the debut. Did I maybe hype myself up too much for Moscow X? I just want to love it so much, and I didn't start it yet. Do you think there's a chance here I built up a little too much? I kind of am putting pressure on Moscow X to be something. I'm hoping it's as good, but is that realistic to think it's going to be as good?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think you just got to go in empty, like not really thinking about it.
I can't think about it. Yeah, you just got to take it for what it is and enjoy reading it. Yeah, really do. The reason I'm caught up in this is I'm thinking back to in the interview with David, and it's like way over a year ago now, but I remember thinking to myself, oh no, your next book won't follow this up? Like, you're going to randomly take us to Russia with different characters?
I remember you talking to me about that off like in one of our pre-pods, yeah.
I wrestled with it for a little bit, and it was obviously where he wanted to go, and no doubt he'll pull it off. But part of me was like, damn, we're not going to see more of these characters now? We're going to have to wait for that? I was like, don't go to Russia. Don't take me to Putin. Leave me with Assad and Sam and Mariam. And I wanted to see the fall of out of the Damascus Station right away. I guess that's just my own impatience. So I'm going to go in with a clear head with Moscow X, but I'm really hoping your theory doesn't hold true about second books always being.
No, me too, man.